Acosta, and she wrote a large part of this was a legal process, that this had been deemed illegal, so it's up to DOJ to make this legal recommendation, ergo it was Jeff Sessions on the face. Do you care either way? How are you feeling about this?
Ultimately it's the substance that counts, but it makes sense that you'd be hearing from the Attorney General. It was 9, not 10. Tennessee's AG backed out, but 9 attorneys general made it clear they were ready to proceed legally in what is a slam dunk case. No one seriously debates that DACA is unconstitutional. The president, the former president, President Obama, made statement after statement making it clear that it wasn't within the law. He just did it. And so now what we're hearing, yes, and what we're hearing from a hostile press corps is, oh, this is so mean, it's so heartless. Hey, who's on the side of the Constitution? And on this occasion, despite the objections of people like Chris Kobach that you heard from John Gizzi, and many Trump-based supporters who wanted to see it end on day one, is this phase out. Now, the phase out...
Can I, if I may, just interject, speaking on behalf of my journalist friends who were sitting in that room? I don't think it was a hostile press corps. I think they were just turning the president's words around. It was the president himself on Friday who said, I love dreamers. It was the president who said months ago, I'm going to approach this dreamer issue by heart. So it's a bit of a conundrum, if you think about how sympathetic the president had been, and now we see the result.
So let's talk about that. So, under the Constitution, what should have happened in acknowledgement that this is illegal and unconstitutional is it should have just been ended immediately, period. That's the strict rule of law position. So accommodating the kind of feelings that the president has expressed, it results in this sort of 2-year phase out. It's actually almost, I guess, a 2.5-year phase out, because in the next 6 months, some of these folks can reapply to extend 2 more years under the White House's proposed phase-out. And that does put this squarely in the hands of Congress. And as was noted, I think, by David, that this White House has made it clear that a DACA-only solution isn't going to cut it. You need to go beyond just this one problem. And let's be really clear about this problem. President Trump didn't create a problem today. Barack Obama, when he was president, created a problem when he knowingly violated the Constitution with this program. But because it's young people, it tugs at our heartstrings, and I understand that. It certainly does. Maybe that will get Congress to act. But it's going to be an interesting 6 months. And I, by the way, have no sympathy for the additional work for Congress. Maybe the Senate should work more than 2 days a week for the rest of 2017.
So you can take that up with members of Congress, and I don't know if they agree with you or not, but I think they only have so many more legislative days to go. So Ken, I wanted to hear from you, and then Andre Segura, to you, with a much different perspective to this whole thing. How do you feel?
So I want to be very clear about what you just heard. Everything you heard about DACA being illegal is wrong. DACA, this decision by President Trump was a political decision, and it's a morally bankrupt one. President after president for over 4 decades have used what's called prosecutorial discretion to determine who is a priority for removal and who is not. And that is exactly what the DACA program is. So you hear a lot of words from this other commentator about rule of law, the Constitution. This is exactly what presidents have done under their authority to enforce immigration law, under their authority to take care of the laws under the Constitution. So your other commentator is flat out wrong. I want to be very clear that this is a political decision. DACA has never been declared illegal. Yes, Texas, the Attorney General here in Texas, where I am, has led the charge against DACA, but no court has ever said that DACA is unconstitutional. In fact, this is exactly what presidents do. This is what George Bush has done, 1 and 2, Reagan, all the way back almost 50 years. So just to say words like this is unconstitutional are meaningless.
Ken, you want to respond?
Yeah, quickly. Look, I appreciate how you feel like you'd like the law to be. But
no, I don't.
This was a. Hey, I sat quietly while you spoke. Now you please don't.
I don't.
You're the assertion that this president has not taken up the legal fight because he might win is just wrong. I mean, this is legally in parallel to the DAPA program, which was found unconstitutional in the same court. And if you just take constitutional as what will the court with jurisdiction say, this court has spoken to a virtually identical program. We all know the outcome. And what the president did today gives this a 2.5-year life. If he said, no, we're going to fight it, guess what? It would be over in 2 months with a preliminary injunction like that.
Let me just respond.
Wait, I have one more point. And so you said just this is an execution of prosecutorial discretion. That is not true. This is the affirmative issuing of work permits. That is not the exercise of withholding prosecution. That is going out and legalizing the illegal.
Go ahead, Andre. Laura Coates, I see you. Let me just say, Laura, I see you. I'm going to come to you after.
I think you might not understand the process, sir. I think you might not understand the process, sir. When people are given prosecutorial discretion in this country, they are given work authorization. And the court that you're referring to is just the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Yes, it is. The Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit. The Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit was wrong. The issue has not been decided by the Supreme Court. And there are, although DAPA is legal, and the Supreme Court has not decided that it's not, there are significant differences between these two programs. The DAPA program would be much bigger. The DAPA program was termed in terms of lawful status, which DACA does not. But the Fifth Circuit was wrong on the DAPA decision. The Supreme Court has not spoken on this. So you need to be clear about when you say a court has ruled this unconstitutional. It is not the ultimate court. And president after president for decades have used this prosecutorial discretion.
Okay, Laura Coates. Laura Coates.
Well,
federal former prosecutor.
That's a good response.
Well, Andre actually is absolutely correct in that the unconstitutional definition that's being used by Ken is actually inaccurate with respect to this case. And remember, it's all about the process here. We keep referring to the DAPA case and what's happening in Texas. Remember, at the time the Supreme Court weighed in as to whether or not there should have been notice and comment proceedings respected to the DAPA proceedings, you had Justice Scalia, who had just passed away, and you had a 4-4 split, which meant that there is no precedent on this issue. It has not been declared unconstitutional. The issue they're having with Jeff Sessions and Justice Department at the moment is that they do not want to be in a position to defend what is otherwise a lawful exercise of executive authority under the prosecutorial discretion standard, but they don't want to agree with the policy they have set on the campaign trails and before at the Senate confirmation hearing they don't agree with. That's the policy behind it. But either way, it is not only premature, it is inaccurate to say that the DACA program is unconstitutional. Having said that, it is the prerogative of the President of the United States and Justice Department to try to do away with the policy. That's the risk of having done an executive order for the past President Obama, not declaring it something more forceful. Either way, however, it is a prerogative that most presidents, at least since the 80s and even back to the 50s, have exercised in terms of setting immigration policy. And how do you know? Because you have the Constitution under Article 2 that says they can do so. You've got the Code of Federal Regulations, you can do so. You've got a whole host of laws. So I'm not clear why you would use the argument that it's unconstitutional when that has no bearing on a case that has not been decided by the ultimate arbiter of constitutionality, the Supreme Court.
Okay. I've got all these lawyers, and I appreciate you are back and forth on constitutional and not constitutional. Laura is correct. Ultimately, it was up to the president. We can't change the past. The man has ruled vis-a-vis his AG, so this program is getting rescinded. You mentioned campaign trails, which got me thinking about the politics of this, Julie. When you add 6 months to this, that puts us roughly at like March, which is right smack. Thank you, in the middle of the lead up to midterms.
Right. I mean, just to go back to what you were asking before, sort of the push-pull did have to do with this question of constitutionality, because President Trump did have Jeff Sessions telling him privately, I'm not going to defend this in court. I can't defend this in court as constitutional. But there is the bigger question now of what happens now.
Yes.
And whether or not, you want to call this a 6-month grace period, or Mr. Cuccinelli pointed out that it's actually more of a 2-year, not 2.5-year, but 2-year period, because if you renew by next month, then your permit could potentially last till October of 2019. But the fact is that this issue is going to be hitting members of Congress right as they're in primary season, right as they're all anticipating re-election races, and the focus is going to be on them, the spotlight is going to be on them in terms of what are they going to do. We're already seeing the immigration advocates, very strongly calling out senators and members of Congress who haven't come out strongly in defense of DACA. That we're going to be seeing them pushing very hard for approval of the DREAM Act. We'll see what Republicans and the White House want to try to insist go along with that. But this is going to be a very hot political debate, and while congressional leaders had said they were inviting this, I think when the spring rolls around, the early spring rolls around, they're going to find this to be maybe not the most convenient debate to be having, but it's a debate that Congress should be having.
Yeah, no, I see Ken nodding, and listen, I 100% agree. We're going to leave it. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you. We're going to come back to DACA in just a little bit and also talk to a couple dreamers. Thank you. But let's also talk about Irma. New update on Hurricane Irma, this monster Category 5 hurricane, packing winds of 185 miles per hour. The latest on Irma's possible track, and what the mayor of Miami-Dade just said about possible evacuations out of Florida. And we are keeping our eye on the markets on this Tuesday afternoon. The Dow down more than 200 points, partly due to these escalating tensions with North Korea. We're also learning about new activity on the ground there involving the movement of another ICBM